We're live on Facebook. We'll be live on YouTube momentarily. We're live on Zoom. We'll share it on 2 more platforms, on 2 other Facebook pages. Oop, we gotta mute ourselves. L'chaim v'levracha. Okay, there we go. Mute, and we are live. Okay, now we're just gonna share it, and we will be set to go. Gives a charuk. What's going on with the internet? Okay, a little slower. Good to see everyone. I don't know. Facebook's not behaving. Who knows why? Maybe Zuckerberg is getting involved. Give me a second. Good evening, Kayla Gittel. Mark Zuckerberg? He's Jewish, but I'm pretty sure he's not involved in my class right now. Oh, there we go. Sponsoring we take from anybody. Okay, one more. This is our last share, and we are good to go. Took a second. You have to be a little patient, and then it works out. Okay. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is literally, I don't know, I guess we're 48 hours from before Shabbos starts, but that means we're very close to Pesach, being that one Shabbos starts, you have 24 hours and there's no real interruption. You go straight into Pesach, and which is an interesting, the next time Pesach is going to begin on a Saturday night is going to be in 20 years from now. So it's a very, very unique, some would say slightly challenging to start a yontif when it's Shabbos. It has its challenges, but Hashem gives it to us. And if you're in Bozeman and you don't have a place for the Seder yet, let me know. We'd love to have you. And we'll have minions and services, etc., etc. So tonight we're going to talk about Passover. We're going to focus on one specific aspect of the Passover Seder. The Seder has 15 steps. And there's mystical reasons for that. It's not the focus of today's class. Open up any Haggadah with commentary and you can read about the 15 Psalms that Jacob sang when he was in Laban's house and how it relates to number 15 and so on and so forth. There's 15 steps. The first step is Kadesh, where we make Kiddush. This year in particular, because it's Saturday night, the Kiddush is called Yak Nahaz. Now, the reason I could say Yak Nahaz with such ease because I grew up from first grade or pre-K saying Yak Nahaz. Yak Nahaz is the acronym for 5 Hebrew words, Yayin Kiddush Ner Havdalah Zman, which is the unique order of Kiddush, sanctifying the holiday when it's on a Saturday night. It's only when it's on a Saturday night. Because you start with Yayin, which means wine. So it's the blessing you make Bori Priagafen on the wine. So the order is first the blessing on wine, then Kiddush, then you actually make the Kiddush consecrating or ushering in the holiness of the holiday. Then you have Ner, you make a blessing on the candle because it's Saturday night. Even though normally at Kiddush you don't do a candle, but you use a candle, it's already pre-lit, but you use it for Havdalah. Then you have Hey is for Havdalah, which is you actually make the blessing separating from holy to holy. Normally we make a separation from holy to weekday. Now we're making a separation from holy to holy. And then the last thing is Zman, which means time, which is the blessing of Shehechiyanu, the special, unique blessing, ushering in the holiday itself, the novelty of the holiday with the special blessings. So the Seder this year, we're going to begin with number one in the order of the Seder, which is Kaddish, which this particular year is a 5-step program within the Kiddush, and it's all in your Haggadah. It's not like you have to get a special book for it. Then you have Urchatz, we go and wash our hands. Then we have Karpas, where we dip. In my case, I dip an onion. Some people dip a potato or whatever. I think, Seth, you join me every year for the onion. Get a little tears, and we dip it into salt water to remind us of the tears. And then we get to step number 4, which is the discussion of tonight's class, which is Yachatz. What is Yachatz? We take the middle matzah, right? On the Seder plate, there's 3 matzahs. The top, the middle, and the bottom, which represent the 3 groups of Jews, the Kohanim, the priests, the Levites, and then the Israelites. We take the middle matzah, we break it in half. And what do? We take the bigger piece and we put it away for the afikoman. We put it away for the dessert that we're going to eat at the end, after the meal. So it's very interesting. A lot of people think, oh my gosh, every year I have the same thing. I've been running a Seder for not 18 years. 18 years I've been running it in Montana. But I've been running public Seders for about 22 years, maybe 20, even 3 years. I've ran Seders from Santa Cruz, California to Richmond, British Columbia, to Oklahoma City. I've been around the block. And by the time it comes to afikoman, to eating the extra matzah, people think that it's just some kind of ridiculous custom as that. But the truth is, eating the afikoman is specifically in commemoration of the Paschal Lamb offering, which we don't have today. We don't have the actual sacrifice and stuff. We don't have the actual sacrifice. So to commemorate that, we eat an extra kazayas, an extra, at least a half of a round shmura matzah after the meal. When you're half asleep and you still have 2 cups of wine to go, you eat more matzah to commemorate that. But the bigger, so when we break the matzah, the middle matzah in half, the smaller piece stays in the kaira, in the Seder plate in front of us. The bigger piece is put away in a cloth. And we'll talk about the details of this soon. And we put it away until the end of the meal. So let's talk about Yachatz, both on a practical level, historical level, and also obviously on a mystical level. So before we start reading the story of the Exodus, right, because the next step after Yachatz, after breaking the matzah, the next step is Magid, where we start saying the story. It begins with this is the bread of affliction, then the kids ask the Manashtama, the 4 questions, and then we answer them. But the right before we start the process of reading the actual story and asking the questions and trying to have the discussion, we break the matzah, right? Because we're trying to tell the story of the slavery, right? That's why it's called bread of affliction. Halach ma'anya, it's a poor person's bread. Historically, paupers ate that kind of bread. They didn't have the ability, they didn't have the equipment, they didn't have the ovens, they didn't have what they needed, so they had some water mixed with flour and made into a flat pancake. Even the paupers can afford that. And because we're going to talk about slavery, and we're going to talk about the bread of affliction, the poor man's bread, so we break the matzah, and we put the second half away for the afikoman. The reason why we wrap it is because some people commemorate the fact that, actually, let me go back a second. A lot of people don't realize, they think that the only reason we eat matzah, this is very important, and your Hebrew school teacher absolutely failed on this one. Not your Hebrew school teacher. I'm talking about the Hebrew school teachers from the 50s and 60s and 70s. A lot of people assume that the only reason we eat matzah is because they left Egypt quickly and there was no time for the dough to rise. It's true, but it's not true. Why? Because in Egypt, before they left, when they were told to have the Paschal Lamb in Egypt on the night before the Exodus, the night before they were going to leave, God told them to eat it with bitter herbs and with matzah. So even before they left, they were eating matzah in Egypt. They took the leftovers of that matzah with them on their shoulders. They were schlepping it out. They didn't put it on their animals. They wanted to commemorate, we're getting out of here. We're free. So they took the bread that they had eaten in Egypt, which was a poor man's bread because they were slaves, but it represented the slavery. That's why it was bread of affliction. In addition to that, when they left, they had dough that did not have time to rise, and that itself also turned into matzah. So there's the bread from before, we call it in Hasidic terminology, it's called the bread from before midnight and the bread from after midnight. The matzah from before midnight and the matzah from after midnight. Because there was a matzah before midnight, which was that they already ate in Egypt and there was only leftovers. And then there was the matzah that came about because the dough didn't have time to rise, and that's the matzah from after midnight because it's after the Exodus. That's very important information that I believe most Jews don't know. It's one of the reasons why on the first night of Pesach, we're very, very careful to finish eating the afikoman before midnight. Now, midnight does not mean 12 o'clock, especially this time of year. If night falls not till 9:02, then midnight is later than 12 o'clock when it's halfway through the night. But we try to eat avikaim before because we're commemorating the matzah that was eaten before midnight while they were still in Egypt. So many Jews have this custom of putting the matzah wrapped in a cloth. If you actually buy a Seder plate kit bag, it comes with an afikoman bag for two reasons. Number one, to remember how they schlepped it out wrapped over their shoulder. But number two, to make sure you don't mix it up. Right? So you want to put it aside, that you don't end up by mistake eating it during the meal. You want to specifically eat it later. Now, many of you at this point should have received the Montana Jewish Voice in the mail for Passover. My entire article on the first page is about why we don't steal the afikoman. While there are many Jews that do have that custom, the Rebbe was very, very, well, I shouldn't say very, very, the Rebbe wrote in the 40s that it's not a good idea because that trains children to steal, and it's never a good idea to train children to steal. In our home, Chavi has instituted from the day we were blessed with Chaya Brook that we don't do afikoman stealing. We give manashtana gifts. So whoever says the manashtana nicely at the Seder, we take them on Cholamoid on the intermediate days and we go buy them a gift. It's not for stealing. We don't want to indoctrinate children that stealing is ever okay. Now, by the way, there's something written by Rabbi Yaakov Sapir Halevi, who lived between 1822 and 1885, and he writes that he once spent Pesach in Sana'a, Yemen. You know, today everyone's busy talking about the Houthis. The Yemenite Jewish community, the Teimanim, is a very, very authentic Jewish community that goes back. They lived in Yemen for over 2,000 years, the Jews. One of the oldest Jewish communities besides Israel, probably the oldest besides Israel. They're the only ones. There's Sephardic custom, there's Ashkenazic custom, then there's the Yemenite custom. They have their own traditions and customs that are not Sephardic and not Ashkenazic. They're their own. In Israel, you go to these Yemenite shuls. They don't do your program. They do their own program. But he said that he came to Yemen. He was there for a Pesach in Sana'a, the capital. And he says every day of Pesach, they baked fresh matzah. Instead of buying it from a bakery, right? They didn't have that luxury. Every day the women would bake as their tradition was from their forefathers. And they knew how to do, the women knew how to do it very quickly so the dough doesn't have time to rise. And at the Seder, one participant would take a matzah, tie it in a napkin, place it on their shoulder and walk around the house. And the others would say to him, other people in the house would say, "Why are you doing this?" And he would respond, "So did our ancestors when they left Egypt in a haste." So there's beautiful customs around the breaking of the matzah. Really beautiful stuff. And yet, in Judaism, there's the practical, and then there's the mystical, which helps us appreciate the practical. And to do the Pesach Seder without heavy doses of Chassidus, heavy doses of Rebbe. You know, today's the Rebbe's 123rd birthday. It's a big day. I mean, I told the kids during dinner, every night we say what we're grateful for. And today I said, amongst other things, I said I was grateful for Chaya coming with me to Big Sky to deliver matzah today. And I got a few of my own, Robert. Don't worry. You didn't mess anything up. It was part of the plan. And I was grateful that 123 years ago, God gifted the world with a baby born to Reb Leivik and Chana Schneerson, who turned out to be our Rebbe, who gifted me and gifted Chavi and gifted so many of us a worldview that is very, very unique and a purpose in life that's very, very unique. You know, someone called me today because their kid was in a car accident and they were at the Bozeman ER. And they called me, "Rabbi," I said, "I'll be there in a minute." Right? Why you call a rabbi? And it was someone that's very close. But the point is, I thought about it. That's what the Rebbe did. The Rebbe did it. Someone who, let's say, would proclaim themselves a secular Jew is calling the Orthodox Chabad rabbi because their kid is in the ER, and they just not. It wasn't a religious visit. It was just a care and concern. That's what we do for each other. That's what the Jewish family does. That's a gift that the Rebbe. Right. When someone's in an ER, right, and they're out of town, they don't. If they're Christian, they don't call their pastor unless they're looking for, what do they call it, last rites. They don't call their pastor just because they need some help in the ER. But the Rebbe gifted the world that we created this family where we see each other as family, and actually that leads us to this discussion about Yachatz, because to study the Seder without the Rebbe's worldview, without mysticism, without Chassidus, you're destroying your own Seder, because there's so many beautiful layers, and I want to go there right now. The two halves of the matzah that we break during the fourth section, the fourth stage in the Seder, represents two types of redemption. You have the smaller redemption and the bigger redemption. The smaller redemption, believe it or not, is going to stay, the smaller piece stays on the Seder plate. Because we're actually going to read the Haggadah about the Exodus from Egypt, about the slavery in Egypt. And the Exodus from Egypt in this context was only a minor redemption. How could you say that? The Exodus from Egypt was the greatest moment that ever happened and led out of Egypt, the splitting of the sea, the giving of the Torah. But the explanation is that it was followed by exile later. It wasn't the ultimate redemption. It was supposed to be the ultimate redemption, but the Jews messed it up. Right? Moses was supposed to lead the Jews into Israel, and that was it. Mashiach was going to come. But we sinned, and we made mistakes, and we had the story of the spies, and the story of the ungratefulness with the manna, and the story with hitting the rock instead of speaking to the rock, and so on and so forth, the sin of the golden calf. I mean, everything that happened in those years in the desert, and the trajectory changed. But because the Exodus from Egypt was followed by further exile, it's not the bigger piece. The second half, the bigger piece, represents the ultimate redemption. When we end each year at the Seder, we say, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Or we say actually a blessing in the Haggadah during the Seder. It's one of the most beautiful moments of the Seder, by the way, not only because it's right before we start eating, maybe that too, but there's a moment in the Seder we make a blessing. And the blessing is, we say part of the Hallel, and we say, blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe, who has redeemed us and redeemed our fathers from Egypt and brought us to this night to eat matzah and more. Likewise, God, our God, and God of our fathers, bring us to other high holidays and festivals that will come to us in peace, glad in the rebuilding of your city and joyful in your service. Then we shall eat of the Chagiga sacrifice and the Pesach offering, which is talking about Mashiach. We thank you for the new song for our redemption and for our liberation of our souls. And obviously this year, every time we talk about redemption and redeeming, it takes our minds to the Jews that have been held now for their second Pesach in Gaza. To think about that is just insane. It's the second Pesach. They've been in Gaza 2 Hanukkahs already, 2 Purims already, one Shavuos already, and this is going to be, listen, with Hashem's help, they'll be out before Pesach. But if God forbid they're not out, the words redemption and redeeming have a no meaning. But the bigger piece of matzah is put aside because it represents the bigger redemption, which will be a redemption with no exile that follows with Mashiach. Now, it really represents two realities that sometimes we struggle to reconcile. What I mean by that is, on the one hand, the matzah is called bread of affliction or bread of the poor man. It's miserable. Literally. You never heard anyone say, ooh, I want to go eat out of that restaurant that serves matzah. You don't hear that. You could eat it. You could enjoy. I know people enjoy matzah. I remember there was a doctor in Oklahoma City when I was a yeshiva student, Dr. Korn. He was a cardiologist. He would always say, Joel Korn, he would always say, as a cardiologist, matzah is the best thing for you. Don't eat the bread, eat the matzah. Okay. So 25 years ago, he was trying to knock sense into me. But no one says, in the same, I'm going to have sushi and matzah for dessert. It does not work because it's bread of affliction and it's bread of poverty. On the other hand, the Zohar tells us that matzah is the bread of faith and the bread of healing. Mechla de asvasa and mechla de memusa. In Aramaic, the Zohar says it's the bread of healing. Literally, it says you should eat matzah. If someone has a physical ailment, they should eat matzah on Pesach and have in mind healing, because it has powers of healing. And if someone struggles with their faith in God, which I think on some level every one of us sometimes does, eat the matzah on Pesach, it will bring you gift of faith. How's it possible that the same bread, the same matzah, the same bread is affliction and poverty, but it's also the greatest thing for faith and healing? How do you reconcile those two? It's the same piece of matzah. That's really it. Matzah represents unity of opposites. They are both true. And in life, at times, to experience the bread of faith and the bread of healing, you must go through the moments of affliction and poverty. And I don't mean necessarily just practical poverty, which is true too, but all forms of insufficiency and inadequacy. People don't feel good about themselves with their poverty, or maybe they really are poor. Maybe they're spiritually poor. Maybe they're mentally poor. Maybe they're emotionally poor. Maybe they're financially poor. But in life, it's two sides of the same coin. It's two sides of the same coin. That the richness in life sometimes, or most times, comes through a process in which you have to go through the slavery first before you reach the Exodus. So when we come to the Seder and we take the matzah, we take the bigger piece, which represents redemption, but we break the matzah in half and we put away the bigger piece for later. How could that be? The same matzah is going to represent the Exodus from Egypt and the Exodus when Mashiach comes. The answer is yes. It's the imperfections of our life that lead us on the trajectory. If we act appropriately, they take us from affliction to richness, from affliction to faith, from poverty to healing. So we put away the bigger piece for the Afikoman to remind us, number one, that the ultimate redemption is yet to come. But also to remind us that sometimes in that brokenness, you don't know when that bigger piece is going to show up in your life. Right now, you feel broken, and the smaller piece of matzah seems very relevant in your life. Everything feels small, but that's a silly way of saying, oh, I'll resign. No, that's it. This is how it is. I'm going to be stuck in slavery and darkness and smallness forever. No, you won't. Stick through it. Hang on tight for the ride, and you'll get to the bigger piece of the matzah when the moment comes. It's also interesting why in Chabad, the Rebbe's had a tradition, also my tradition, because I follow my Rebbe, that I don't break the matzah into two. I do break the matzah into two, but the part that I'm putting away for the Afikoman, we break it into 5 pieces. Actually, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, Reb Shalom Dov Ber, who passed away in 1920, his son, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, who was the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, asked his father once during the Seder, what's up with that? Why are you breaking it into 5? And he said to him something like, "As mevil alt wissen wird man gech alt." If you want to know everything, you get old quickly. You don't have to know everything. But a while later, they were taking a walk, and the Rebbe Rashab heard how his son just really wanted to know, why did you break it into 5? So he said to him that the middle matzah represents, right? The 3 matzahs represent Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the 3 forefathers of Judaism. The middle one represents Yitzchak, Isaac. And the word Yachatz, which means breaking the middle matzah, Yud, Ches, Tzadik, are 3 letters that are part of the name Yitzchak. Yitzchak was the attribute of Gevurah, of severity. He saw the world from a very disciplinarian perspective, from a very structured perspective, where there was no room for error. Avram Avinu represented kindness, mercy. There was room for mistakes, maybe. There was room for all kinds. Yitzchak was very, very disciplined. And the problem with too much structure and too much discipline is that it can create havoc. Because discipline is important and structure is important. But when there's no room for breathing, because there's too much structure and there's too much discipline, it hurts. So you need Abraham to come with kindness and redeem Gevurah. That's why it says in Psalms, L'Yaakov Eshepadas Avram. There's the idea of redemption where Jacob redeems Abraham. Abraham has to redeem Isaac. What does that mean? He has to soften the blow of the structure and the discipline. There's 5. We say this also on Hoshana Rabbah on the last day of Sukkot when we hit the Hoshanas of the willows on the floor. There's 5 layers of gevura, of severity in the mystical realm. So we break the second half of the matzah into 5, said the Rebbe to his son, right? The Rebbe Rashab told his son Yosef Yitzchak, we break it into 5 because we need to redeem the severity. We need to break the severity and bring it to a state of kindness and mercy. And part of the process of the Seder is to look at the slavery, look at the challenges, and help us see those challenges as steps in the journey to find redemption, steps in the journey to find healing, steps in the journey to find faith. So we even do physical things to reflect that by breaking that half of matzah, even the bigger piece, the part of Afikomen, break it into 5 so that we can ease the transition of the structure and discipline to allow for the mercy and kindness of Abraham to come into the picture, to sweeten the severity. And so there's, on a very practical level, Yachatz is a moment of the Seder which normally lasts about 3 seconds because we break the matzah, but it really has very, very deep significance. Actually, in a different Farbrengen in 1960, the Rebbe spoke about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. The Baal Shem Tov is known as Yisrael. His name was Israel Baal Shem Tov, but he was known as Yisrael of Akkop. Now, up until this talk in 1960, everyone that read the history of the Baal Shem Tov assumed that the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, was born in a place called Akkop. But he wasn't. He was born in a town called, I think it was called Tlust. T-L-O-S-T. So then why was he called Rabbi Israel of Akkop if he wasn't from Akkop? So the Rebbe said in that 1960 Farbrengen that Akkop was in Russian means, or Ukrainian, whatever dialect it was, it meant trenches. And in the city where the Baal Shem Tov's parents lived, his parents died when he was very young. But in those first few years of his life, his parents were so poor they couldn't afford to live in their house anymore. So in the town that they lived in, it used to be a town surrounded by city walls. But the walls had fallen, and there were these semi-trenches that were created from the stones. And he was being raised. He was living in the trenches on the outskirts of the city. They weren't living in a home. So the founder of the Hasidic movement, the man who revolutionized Jewish life the way we know it today, there isn't a facet of Jewish life today that is not left with a strong impression from the Baal Shem Tov's teachings and style of everything. There's nowhere in the world today where Jewish life is being experienced without it being affected by the Baal Shem Tov. So the guy who's going to bring Mashiach, the guy who spread Jewish mysticism, the guy who was the first one to start spreading the depths of Judaism, he's a guy that grew up in the trenches. Seems so opposite. How could the Redeemer, not the Redeemer because he's not the Redeemer, but the person leading us towards redemption, the person teaching the well springs of Hasidus to the world so that we can understand the deeper understanding of Torah, to look at another human being the way the Baal Shem Tov did. How could it be that he grew up in the trenches? Not only grew up in the trenches, but that was his name, Rabbi Yisrael from Akkop, even though he wasn't from there. What are you going to call him for the rest of his life? Rabbi Israel. Imagine he met a guy. He said, what's your name? He says, my name is Mendel from the Underpass. Even homeless people don't name themselves after the underpass. Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov was named from Akkop. He was Rabbi Israel from the trenches, because that's really the message in life. Your path to greatness, and more importantly, our path to impact. Our path to impacting the world in an incredible, powerful, inspirational, holy way is not defined by our bread of affliction, by our bread of poverty. It's not defined by living in the trenches. Where you come from is not as important as where you're going. And when we break the matzah, the Seder, it's so vital to pause and say, yes, the bigger piece is going away for the Afikomen. I don't know how this plays out. Somebody told me today or yesterday that I've asked for blessings and a whole bunch of things, and I never get my blessings answered. I didn't say anything. There's nothing to say. You're missing the point. Blessings don't work that way. God is not your ATM machine. You want an ATM? Go to get a sugar daddy or something. Go find someone that wants to pay your bills. God is not that. God is someone that wants a relationship with you, and the relationship is a journey. And some days it's bread of affliction, and some days it's bread of poverty. Some days it's bread of faith, and some days it's bread of healing, and some days it's all of that together on the same day, and you get all confused. In the morning, I felt like God was everything, and now I feel like God is nothing. I'm going out of my mind. That's the point. It's a journey. But I want to take it one layer. What I shared with you so far is primarily, at least the Hasidic ideas, the mystical ideas, is from different teachings of the Rebbe. But just yesterday arrived in the mail. It went on sale last week. By the time I went 15 hours later to order it on Amazon, there was no more available. It sold out. So I messaged the author who I know. I said, "You're not going to do this to me. You printed a book about Pesach with commentary on the Haggadah. I need it." So he says, "Oh, I have a friend in New York that has 3 or 4 copies. We'll get you one." So it came yesterday. Rabbi Judah Michel, he's a rabbi that lives in Israel, but he also runs the HASC summer camp for children that have severe special needs. Zizi goes to a camp called Camp Simcha that's for kids that are functional and special needs. This is for kids that are Down syndrome, etc. It's it's a Jewish camp for them. Rabbi Judah Michel runs the camp, but he also wrote this Haggadah. It's called Baderech, Along the Path of Redemption, with a commentary on the Haggadah. He probably compiled it over years. I didn't even read the introduction yet. I wanted to see what does Rabbi Judah say about, it's always nice when you read a book and you know the author personally. Mm-hmm. What does he say about this breaking of the matzah? So he shares something from the Meshech Chochmah. The Meshech Chochmah is the same author as the sefer called Or Sameach, which is Rabbi Yisrael Meir of Dvinsk, Hakoyen of Dvinsk. He was one of 2 rabbis of the city of Dvinsk in Belarus. The other rabbi was the Rogatchover, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, the famous Nazarite who had long hair, the Hasidic rabbi. The other rabbi was Rabbi Meir Hakoyen of Dvinsk, and he has a commentary on the Torah. I have it in my library at home. It's called Meshech Chochmah. So he has a commentary on the Rambam on Maimonides called Or Sameach. He has a commentary on Torah called Meshech Chochmah. He passed away in 1926, if you want to know for context. So about 99 years ago, the Or Sameach passed away. He says, when we break the matzah, we need to think about the source of all brokenness, the source of all division. Right? If you look at the order of the Seder, we make Kiddush, we wash our hands, then we eat the vegetable dipped in the salt water, which represents the tears. So he says, when you want to figure out why you're in tears and how you get out of those sad moments, you can see it in the breaking of the matzah. Because breaking of the matzah, like I said, is the reflection of all division. What was the first moment that brought division into the world according to the Meshech Chochmah? What brought division into the world was when Joseph and his brothers were fighting. In the book of Genesis, Joseph and his older brothers are killing each other. Not literally, but they can't stand each other. And Jacob is very bothered by it. Right? His wife Rachel, Joseph's mother, is gone. So he says that he's really desperate for them to reconcile. So he sends Joseph to go find his brothers in Shechem. I heard they're out there, go find them. And it says that he got there. Vayiru oisei meirachik. The brothers saw him from a distance. So normally what that means is they looked and they saw him coming from a distance. Says the Meshech Chochmah, listen to this. He says, Vayiru oisei meirachik. The reason they were so upset at him is because they saw Joseph from a distance. They didn't allow him to get close. And from a distance, you can hate anybody. Look at all the battling and nastiness we have in our country. It's because then they tell you, you know what, I met this guy. He's really nice. Well, why are you so shocked? Because the caricature they created of him on television didn't fit? But that's how we are. If you keep the person at a distance, and you don't listen to their story, and you don't bring them into your life, and you don't allow yourself to have a conversation, of course you can hate them and want to kill them. That's exactly what Joseph's brothers did. They saw him without closeness. They saw him from a distance. So what did? They put him in a pit. And what did Yosef yearn for his entire life? This is something so powerful. When I read it today, I was like, whoa, whoa. His entire life, everyone gave him credit and accolades. Oh my gosh, Joseph, you're amazing. Potiphar and his wife thought he was amazing. The butler and the baker and the butcher, though, everyone in the prison thought he was amazing. Pharaoh hired him, thought he was amazing. And you know what he was desperate for the whole time? For his own brothers to recognize him. He says, yeah, it's nice. The whole world loves me. The whole world admires me. Woohoo! My own flesh and blood. They don't even see me. They see me from a distance. That's why later when the brothers come to Egypt 22 years later, what happens? It says Joseph recognized them and they didn't recognize him because they never saw him. How could they recognize him? He always saw them, so he immediately recognized them. Sometimes it's hardest. Rabbi Judah says this in the book. By the way, after it comes out, after it's reprinted, if you want to get it later, you can ask me. I'll send you a link. It's fire. He's such a chassid. He's not a Lubavitcher, quote unquote, but he's a chassid. He's past. He's the man. He says so often the ones that we have the hardest time seeing, appreciating, are the ones that are closest to us. And when we're deep in our salt water and we're crying, we have to have the decency and the honesty to ask ourselves how we ended up in this state of bitterness. And so often the answer is that we've distanced those who we're meant to be closest with, and that's why we're in such a state of bitterness. And that is step one in reconciling and bringing redemption to your soul. That's why, what was the ultimate moment when Benjamin finally comes down after the whole shenanigans back and forth, go back to your father and come back and go back. When Benjamin finally comes and they finally and Joseph says, I am Joseph, your brother, is my father still alive? What happens? He falls on Benjamin's shoulder and cries, and Benjamin falls on his shoulder and he cries, and it says they kissed all the brothers and they cried with each other and they were speaking, right? Now that they were able to open up about how they got to where they are, were they able to reconcile? So when we break the matzah and we ask ourselves, why is there brokenness in the world? We have to look at the original division. The original division was the family feud of Joseph and his brothers, and ask ourselves, are we doing enough in our lives not to end up like that? So allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to have those tears of karpas, to have the tears of the salt water, and are we doing our best to remove division? And the reality is, especially, and we're going to wrap it up with that especially in 2025, there are people that wake up every single morning, they wake up, think about that, and they have to figure out how they're going to express their hatred for the people they hate the most. What post are they going to post and make sure everybody knows who they hate? You're shaking your head, Baruch, but that's the truth. There's people that do this every single day, and the media eggs them on. And this one does it in the name of the Constitution. This one does it in the name of democracy. This one does it because Bibi's destroying the world. This one's doing it because Biden's destroying the world. The other one's doing it because Trump is destroying the world. This one's doing it because Putin's destroying the world. Orban, there's a whole list of people that are destroying the world. And all it shows is that you are unhealthy on the inside. Because you could wake up every single day and bring people together. You could wake up every day and be compassionate and kind and merciful and help those that need it most. You could do that every single day, and guess what? You'll go to sleep at night a lot happier. Or you could turn on your blank. I'm going to be very careful with my language, but your social media. I'm not going to say the words that I'd like to say about social media. It's not appropriate for rabbis or for most people in a shul. Or you could turn on your social media and make yourself feel good for 5 seconds by blasting someone or something. And how does that help you? How does that help the world? How does that heal divides? How does that turn affliction into bread of healing? How does it turn bread of poverty into bread of faith? It doesn't. You'll get stuck in the affliction, stuck in Egypt, stuck in poverty, and you'll never kricharos, you'll never crawl out. So I think Rabbi Judah's teaching is so powerful that every time we experience and see even a broken matzah, let's ask ourselves, where did division start? And it started by those who couldn't see their own stinking brother. They were so caught up in themselves that their own brother they couldn't see. Israel's pretty bad right now, the land of Israel. The hatred is unbearable. From the left, from the right, yes, Bibi, no Bibi, yeah. It's not okay. It's not okay. You could have opinions. You should have opinions. But first of all, you don't have to have an opinion about everything. For example, I don't understand tariffs. I've been trying for 4 days. I don't understand it. It's either above or below my pay grade. I don't understand it. And guess what? I'm okay with that. I don't have to understand it. Until the president calls me and asks for my opinion, and then I'll study it. But until then, I'm good. You don't have to have an opinion about everything, but even if you do, you don't have to fill the world with spewed hatred, with division, with nastiness. Pesach's a time of redemption, of royalty. Drink your 4 cups of wine. Celebrate the gifts of your life. God took you out of Egypt, and he's going to take you out of this fakakta exile. Celebrate it. Celebrate being a Jew. You know how lucky you are? There's a world of lost people who don't know what's coming and going. And you have Tainas Yisrael. You have the incredible wisdom of God. Celebrate it. And spend your time celebrating. Spend your time sharing it with others. And stop living in a world of nastiness. Because no matter how right you think you may be, as the Tanya says, if you wrestle with someone that's muddy, you're going to be very muddy. So just don't. No one hired you for the job. You're not in charge of world peace and division. Your job is just to be a beacon of kindness, empathy, compassion, freedom, redemption, royalty, and everything else that the Jewish people represent. Have a kosher and freilich and Pesach. Have a happy, healthy, and kosher Passover. Be inspired, be uplifted. Find the inner redemption. Don't spend your whole Seder thinking about the Jews in Egypt. Find the redemption within yourself. Are you a free person, or are you bogged down by your own inner demons that are keeping you enslaved? I hope the answer is that you will find your inner freedom, and then we will all experience external freedom. B'mheira v'yameinu amen. Sei gesund. If you need info about a Seder in your town and you don't live in Bozeman, message me and I'll try to hook you up with the Chabad community there. Sei gesund, be well, and Chag Sameach.